What's up, everybody? Your regularly scheduled episode of the Coast to Coast podcast from inside Carolina starts now. I'm Joey Powell. We're brought to you by Johnny T-Shirt. Sherrell, McMillan, and Sean Moran are here with me. Guys, happy summertime to you. We are officially in the latter part of May, looking straight at summer vacation. Colleges have now graduated. Everybody's kind of got off campus for their break. I don't think summer sessions have started yet. So, what better time for us to try to clean up some loose ends of what's going on around Carolina basketball than right now? And I think the first thing we probably ought to do is, after such a fast and furious period of portal transfers and recruiting and guys coming and going and putting their name in and taking their name out, the whole rigmarole that comes with that, let's reset things where they stand. Sherrell, you did a note on the premium message boards this past week, earlier in the week, just kind of giving folks what we know, because there just have been minimal developments since the portal officially closed. So give us a little bit of the flavor. I know it's mainly focused on two international targets right now, but if you wouldn't mind, take a few and reset the board for us, as it were.
Right. So I'm sure we're going to talk about him later, but Drake Powell has kind of made it clear that barring some dramatic change over the next couple of weeks, that he fully intends on staying in the draft. So that's happened since we last talked. So that's a data point. And then there are two, we'll call them wings, two wings from Europe that North Carolina we know has contacted. I do not believe that is all the wings they have contacted from Europe. Those are the two that we've been able to confirm. So one is Ivan Kharchenkov. We've talked about him before. He plays for Bayer Munich. Just a kind of a grown man, even though he's 18, with the way he plays and the way he looks. So we know that North Carolina's talking to him. I think Arizona is another school that folks have mentioned with him. Not quite sure where things stand, other than with these international recruitments, there are a lot of things to do. Let's put it that way. A lot of process, a lot of I guess you call it red tape, a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of things you have to do to get international student into a school, and then, frankly, not sounding haughty or anything, a school like North Carolina. Same thing with Luka Bogovac. We haven't talked about him on here. That is a name we just were able to share. I think within the last week or so, we know that North Carolina's talking to him. He's a bit older. He's 22, whereas Kharchenkov is 18. And he probably will end up playing some on the wing wherever he decides to play in college, but he's probably honestly more of a two guard, whereas Kharchenkov is more of a pure, I would say, three. I'll let Sean jump in on that. But so those are the two that we know they've been talking to. I mean, frankly, we know they've been talking to others, but those are the only two we feel really good about confirming and sharing and all that stuff. So that seems to be where the board stands. There was contact to another player who was in the portal, but it doesn't seem like that is going anywhere. That player recently withdrew from the draft, but it doesn't seem like that is really going anywhere from a Carolina perspective. So right now it looks like it's just the two wings that are known, and then the other guys in the background, especially from overseas, that they're talking to.
And clearly, the wing is a position of need, specifically around depth. I'm not going to use Sherrell's favorite phrase of depth piece, but North Carolina does need more depth and more ability to score from the wings. And so these players make a ton of sense there. Sherrell alluded to the fact that the process is very difficult, very layered, very meticulous. And I would just kind of use a comparison for folks listening or watching this, that if you think about how different a domestic flight is versus an international flight, right? There's probably some similarities there as far as just the the diplomacy and the other layers of things that go on to it, not just getting a player into school. There's a lot of other things that come with that. Sean, if you wouldn't mind, compare and contrast the two, Bogovac and Kharchenkov, for everybody, because I don't think we've had the time or the space to literally put that onto wax yet. So if you wouldn't mind, go ahead.
Kharchenkov, so he's, as Sherrell mentioned, Bayern Munich. They're about to start their domestic playoffs, the German BBL, on Monday. So, given the fact that they'll probably make it to the championship round, they will probably be playing through mid to late June. I think is how it goes. But in terms of playing style, very physical, younger, around 19 years old, about 6'5" wing. Pretty strong slasher, attacking the rim, good moving off the ball. Shooting wise, he isn't afraid to let the ball go up from three, but over the last 3 years in different levels of competition has been, if memory serves me correct, right around 30%, if not a little bit lower from a shooting perspective, and free throw wise has been in the 60s, but that's been high volatility in terms of how he shot it. So definitely some work to do on his shot. I think he has a decent looking stroke, but probably some fine tuning there. But once again, more from him: physical, strong finishing at the rim, and he's not afraid to post up guards. Really likes that left block if he's able to catch the ball in a post position. And then when you go over to Bogovac, his season is done. He played very well in the Adriatic League, a little bit older, so he has that experience. And from watching, I guess it was close to 2 years ago, his team played USC from a scrimmage perspective, and looking at him physically, he guarded Hosea Sellers, who was at Stanford last year, now St. John's, a decent amount. Boogie Ellis was the clear best player on that floor, but shooting wise, he shot close to 40% from three. That's going to be his main offensive attribution. Nice looking stroke, shoots it very, very easy. A little bit of a slow release, which could be concerning, but he can do a little bit off the dribble as well. Defensively, not going to be a standout defender, but with his size, isn't somebody that teams will try to pick on. But very talented offensively and a good looking stroke from the outside.
If you know what North Carolina has and you only get to pick one, based on just measurables alone, who do you take? And then based on what you've seen on film, who do you take?
It's a good question. I think there is that strong need at the three spot. Obviously Powell will be there. There has been talk about playing bigs, which I disagree with in terms of you probably don't want to see Stevenson out there given some of the lateral issues on his end. So I do think that three is a need, and that's where Kharchenkov and his ability to attack the rim could be helpful, but also knowing shooting is a big question mark. I think Bogovac, also from that age of scoring almost 14 points per game in a very competitive league, would be probably a more easier transition if you're looking at really a one year time frame. There might be some similarities with Dixon. I think he's a little bit bigger, but coming in at 21, 22 is a lot different than coming in at 19, just as he showed over the last 2 years with his development. And I think his really just agility and movement with the ball, he's able to do a little bit more than Kharchenkov is. I'd say more of a straight line type of player. So if I had to pick one, I would go with Bogovac. But you could make an argument that both of their skill sets could be worthwhile right now.
See, that's the sauce. That's the sauce that we love here, and that's why we are your favorite podcast. Sherrell, give me some more gravy.
Yeah, I was going to ask Sean a question. Like, of the two, who do you think would be the more adept creator at the NCAA level? Obviously not primary creators, but who probably has more creation, I guess, for themselves and others among the two, or between the two?
I think Bogovac has more. He's more comfortable with the ball in terms of if you had to play him at the one, or probably more in pick and rolls of handling the ball for prolonged periods of time, even under pressure. Kharchenkov has some pretty strong assist numbers or assist rate, depending on what you're looking at. A lot of that is stationary, so reading off of cuts, and I think his IQ is pretty high just from looking at how he is moving off the ball. And once again, from his adaptation, playing in the EuroLeague and playing in the BBL, very good comparables. But I do think Bogovac, just from his ball handling ability, would be able to offer a little bit more.
I asked that because, Joey, Sean, y'all answer. It seems like shot creation and then like the ability to make shots are the two biggest offensive issues for North Carolina. So it's like if you can get someone who definitely helps with the shooting, but partly helps with the creation, then maybe that's the better fit. Do y'all agree that those are the two offensively biggest pressing issues for UNC as presently constructed?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Right now, if the shot clock's down under 10 seconds, the question is who are you going to give the ball to, or what are you going to run? I don't think Evans had a very strong season, but a lot of that was he was handling the ball, bringing it up, giving it up pretty quickly in the offense, and then running the offense through. And Seth Trimble can attack, but probably not much of off the dribble. So I do think there's a question marks of if the shot clock's winding down, what do you do? And I would say, yeah, Bogovac would be able to add more so than Kharchenkov.
I think when North Carolina was at its worst last season, it was because guys couldn't get their own shots. And if that's, you can knock R.J. Davis and Ian Jackson as much as you want to, but those two guys could get their own shots, and that was something you could almost guarantee. Even with RJ's diminutive height, he was still able to mostly on step backs get his own shot, and that was to North Carolina's detriment at sometimes because the other team knew it as well. But yeah, I think if you're having to replace that creativity and that ability to get separation for yourself to get a shot off or for somebody else, I think that would probably be the more valued of the two, if you're asking me. I want to point out when Sean said earlier that North Carolina will have Powell back, he was, of course, referring to Jonathan Powell because Drake Powell, as Sherrell alluded earlier, is probably going to make himself quite a nice sum of money in next month's NBA draft because he showed out at the combine this past week. His measurables for both the standing vert and his other vert number were just through the gym roof. And I think that there's clearly, as we all knew, the tail of the tape for him was really, really high. I think we all knew and expected that was going to be an asset that everybody knew of before they saw Drake Powell work out. And then when he decided to shut it down at the combine, that tells me that somebody likes what they see. Sean, elaborate a little bit more about what combine measurements can mean for a player like Drake Powell, who, was not a premier player on anybody's scouting report last year for North Carolina, did a lot of things really well, has all the measurables, has all the athleticism, and now all of a sudden, at the combine, he's shutting things down, not even participating in team games. Tell me a little bit about what that says to you, kind of reading between the lines.
Well, I think it to some extent verifies some of the hype that he was getting coming into college. A lot of that was based on those measurables, the size, the length. Maybe not as much from an athleticism perspective because he didn't have those specific measurables, but you knew he was athletic and agile. So his high school ranking was predominantly based on that. And then you get into the game set, and I don't think anybody was probably overly surprised on what his actual contribution was during the season. I think we tried to lay it out, and a lot of people across the board laid it out that, hey, he's not going to come in and light it up from a scoring perspective, but he was a very solid addition, and you would have loved to have seen him, especially in his second year, start to grow on the court. But I think having you look at the mock drafts, and a lot of them are great in moments of time, but they're all guessing, right, for the most part, or trying to get information at that point in time, and it's really not until June where they start to hone in on where things are at. So there is a lot of fluctuation, but you did really see Powell come out of the first rounds and even out of some of them over the course of the season based on maybe not contributing as much as people expected by having him as a top 10 preseason draft pick. So I think seeing the height, the wingspan, the vertical, I think that all just said, hey, this guy does have a lot of natural talent and natural ability, and is why I think we've always been pretty consistent that even though he wasn't in the mocks or second rounds, like picking him, probably not lottery, but especially picking him in the early 20s, I still would have him slotted in there, especially with some of those teams that have 3 or 4 picks. Oklahoma City, Brooklyn, Washington has 2. I think then you're betting on that potential as well as those measurables and your coaching staff to develop a guy like that.
Yeah, I'm not springing this on Sean because I know he hates this, but once in a while I do kind of, I guess, put rubber to the road. Sean, I want you to give me a player comp for Drake Powell as far as potential, right? Like what's his ceiling, based on what we know about him and what we know about his measurables, and then what's potentially his floor as an NBA player?
So you're right. I do hate the player comps, and this one there's a little bit of difference in height, but Jaden McDaniels, I think listed around 6'9", but has around that 7 foot wingspan, and he was a guy that came into high school, came into college with that similar ranking based on that size, length, agility, and probably didn't have that dominant freshman season that dominant freshman season that many people might have expected based on the preseason ranking or preseason draft publicity that he was getting. And he was a guy that took a little bit of time to get going, and he's still not a guy that you want as your number one or two option offensively, but he is a guy that's going to stuff the stat sheet, the one that teams need, especially as a coming off the bench early on or a reliable starter, somebody that can guard a few different positions and somebody that can make people pay offensively when he does have the chance. So I kind of see that with Drake to an extent. I think that there are differences in the game. You look at his high school play, Drake was on the ball a lot, loved the pull-up jump shot a lot. I still think the three-pointer needs to get better, but there are the similarities to me, a lot of the potential, a lot of the physical attributes, and maybe it doesn't get to an all-star level, but it can get to a long-term starter and playoff contributor down the road. And then from a floor perspective, measurables are one thing, but you do have to put it on the court. Defensively, I think Drake gets a lot of credit defensively, but he also got blown by a lot or wasn't in his position on ball a lot as well. And then offensively, I still think the shot, while he did shoot 37%, to me, structurally, still some issues, and probably one of the few things myself and Sherrell have disagreed with over the course of the season. But I still think there's a lot of work to be done. And if he does go to one of those teams that has multiple picks, or even a playoff team that maybe doesn't need him as much, could you get stuck in that G League or that up and back system for too long because you aren't as prioritized maybe as some others? So from a floor, I don't think it would go that low, but he definitely has some room to work to make sure he is that NBA contributor and solid first round draft pick and isn't playing overseas in a few years.
I appreciate that, man. I know that's kind of stretching your comfort zone a little bit, but that's why you're such a good team player. Sherrell, I'm going to ask you. Sean dipped into this a little bit, and I think it's a fascinating thought with just about any draft, especially a guy that people that listen to this show are going to be really in tune to in Drake Powell's future. Where would you like to see him go? That would be kind of the best scenario for Drake. And you can consider a lot of things there. You can consider, where the team picks, how many picks they have, what does their contract situation look like with other players? Just where's a place that you think would be a great fit for Drake that will either develop him quickly or that will give him, the opportunity to jump in and find a home, as opposed to maybe getting mired into one of the situations that Sean just laid out?
I would say, in just personal opinion, he doesn't need to go to a good team. Because if you go to a good team, what Sean said is going to happen. If he goes to Oklahoma City or, Houston or who else is good? Minnesota,
Denver.
some of the
Yeah.
Denver. Well, Denver actually might be one where he needs to go because they have 5.5 players, and they're locked into so much money. So I would say if it's going to be a good team, it needs to be a team where they're locked into like 2 or 3 stars who are making a ton of money. So they're going to have to develop younger guys who are cheap, which Drake will be relatively compared to what other guys are making. So
Like Danny
teams
Green.
like Danny Green. So teams like that, whatever team you think fits that description, a team with superstars who make a lot of money, who needs role players that are cheap, and then frankly, a lot of teams that are just going to let him play. Because more than anything, I think he needs to be on the court. He needs to play as much as possible. And a lot of times that only happens, especially at the NBA level, if you're on a team that's not so great or a team that is mired in injuries. So I think Brooklyn is very attractive for that reason because it's not a good team. And, Cam Johnson is there. I'm sure they're probably going to try to, this is play the speculation. This is rumors, this is innuendo, but I'm sure they're going to try to move someone like Cam Johnson and get picks and go the OKC route with rebuilding. So that would be a place where he could go play a whole lot, and be able to, just find himself as a player and find himself at the NBA level. So either somewhere that has really expensive stars or somewhere that's just not a very good team. I think those are the kind of two ideal places. A team that's very good and very young, not a great fit. So like, I know
No Charlotte.
OKC.
No Charlotte.
Well, let's not talk about Charlotte, but like OKC for example, like they have a certain type of player they draft, and I think Drake is that type of player. But there's no path to immediate playing time for him at OKC at all, probably for another couple of years. And then you add in all the picks they have in the future, and it's just like, would he ever even play there? So yeah, it needs to be a bad team or a team that really needs cheap labor to play a lot. I think are the best places for him.
The Thunder's roster right now is fascinating for that very reason. If you look at how many guys have DNPs on that roster, even on days where they blow somebody out by 40, the names that are on that roster, just like, holy cow, that's where that guy is.
And they still have like 20 number one picks in the next 4 years or something ridiculous, or 5 years. So that's not a good spot. But yeah, I think that's what he needs to do. He needs to play. He needs to play a lot at the NBA level, not the G League level.
When you're considering, opportunity and stuff like that, I would almost think it's probably the same as shopping a Johnny T-shirt, in the sense that you want to go to a place where the opportunity is abound, much like the selection is unlimited at Johnny T-shirt, East Franklin Street in Chapel Hill. Hey, look, I know some of y'all have gotten turned off by the way I do these reads, but I am looking out for our friends at Johnny T-shirt the same way they're looking out for you. How you feel about that? Use that extra 10% code that you find on the premium message board. Save yourself some more money. Use that amazing selection. If Johnny T-shirt don't have it, you don't need it. Johnny T-shirt, big supporters of this here show, big supporters of Inside Carolina. We want you guys to show the love to them as well. As we get down to the short rows here with college baseball, the Tar Heel baseball team is really starting to set their sights on a certain town in the Midwest to play some postseason ball. And I think that if you would like to get some gear to commemorate that, if you want to get yourself a baseball jersey, and hopefully North Carolina is hosting both a regional and a super, go get you some gear, rock it to the Bosch, tell them the Coast to Coast sent you, everybody wins. And then the Tar Heel baseball team will win. So it's just layers upon layers of winning, right? You'll thank me later, I promise. Johnny T-shirt right there on Franklin Street, johnnytshirt.com. Make sure you hit them up. If you're listening to this on audio, there will be some ads that drop in right after this. I think on video, you're just going to see me continue talking to Sherrell and Sean. So hang around. We appreciate it. Coast to Coast podcast from IC. All right, guys. Last thing I want to talk about before we get out of here for this episode of the show. Sherrell McMillan, Sean Moran are here with me. Guys, we are in the, I guess, what would you call it? The evaluation period. Sherrell, there used to be a name for this. What was it? Like, it used to be the eval period, or what was it?
Yeah, the technical name is the non-scholastic evaluation period.
Okay, well, non-scholastically, I want you to talk a little bit about what this looks like. And then I want you and Sean to kind of hypothesize with me for a little about what is high school recruiting going to look like as the, as the transfer portal continues to get bigger, as the transfer portal becomes more prominent, as transfer portal continues to dominate the way players are selected to certain college programs and the way they matriculate to college and so on and so forth. All of that, I think we've said in a couple of past shows that high school recruiting is going to look different. And this is the first time I think that, at least from IC's coverage and kind of considering where things are, it does look markedly different. And there are reasons behind that. So Sherrell, I want you to kind of peel the onion back a little bit. Tell folks, first off, why coverage is the way it is right now. And then also let's look forward to what might college basketball recruiting from the high school and AAU ranks look like in the future. And Sean, I'm going to have you kind of speak into this too, because I think it's fascinating and is more of a long-term conversation that I think is going to be on everybody's, front porch for quite a while.
Since we're peeling back the onion, thank you, Joey, for muting my mic. I forgot to unmute it, and I was looking something up and tapping, and I think you could hear it. So thank you, Joey, for being a great host, since we're talking about peeling back onions. As far as high school recruiting goes, part of the reason this year, our coverage is going to be a little bit different. It really is just this first evaluation period. So really, for a couple of years now, there used to be 2 evaluation periods in April. There was one basically the week after the Final Four, the same week as the Masters, and then there was one at the end of April. And those were used really to set the agenda for most staffs moving forward for the rest of the summer about who you're going to look at, who you maybe have as a secondary target, all those things. And the coaches basically said between the transfer portal and having to be out on the road recruiting at eval periods and trying to host visitors and everything, it was kind of too much. So what they revised the calendar and moved the eval period from April into the third week in May every year. And that was done so that the portal would have closed. A lot of the portal work could be done kind of like free agency before the draft, if you want to look at it that way. All that work could be done, and then they could focus on high school. So we covered it last year, and it was fine. We were able to see a lot of players who either UNC ended up offering fairly quickly after the live period. I think there was like 5 or 6 offers immediately after Indianapolis last year. And then we were also able to get some contacts for guys in lower classes. But to be frank, this year, a big part of the reason there wasn't on-site coverage is because I got married on May 18th, 12 years ago. And this weekend, I did not want to be gone again for our wedding anniversary weekend. So that's part of it. But I think from a larger perspective, it kind of is what is really the value of high school basketball recruiting for us as a staff covering it, and then UNC as a staff as far as building those relationships and everything. And I don't know if there's a correct answer just yet, because everybody's still filling this out. But why recruit a top 75 kid or a top 100 kid or a kid that you want to develop over a couple of years if you don't know that you're going to be able to develop him over a couple of years because he's only tied into a 1-year deal? Why recruit, a top 5 player, as Sean has said so many times, when either they're going to be gone in a few months because they played well and everything worked out and they're one and done, or they weren't quite what you thought they were, or not quite ready yet to be what you wanted them to be, and they have a bad experience and they transfer and you don't get the benefits of all that time you spent recruiting them over the years. So it's kind of, it's not quite a zero-sum game, but it's close for coaches, I would say, in that respect. So it's just a lot of trying to feel and figure out exactly what you want to do. And I don't know that North Carolina even knows yet. If you look at their offers in 2025, they basically offered all the top guys at the very beginning and then kind of worked their way down. If you look at their offers in 2026, not quite to the same degree, but very similar. But there's been a market, I would say, drastic almost, just lack of additional targets and additional offers over the last 6 months. It's kind of been Rippy Jr., who switched circuits from EYBL to Adidas this year, the point guard from New Jersey. And then, they've been on Cole Clover for some time. And there's a couple of other guys that they have offered, but you're just like, is it serious enough that North Carolina can get this kid from this place? I'm saying a lot of words, and maybe it's not amounting to much. But I think the point is that the strategy is still in flux because this stuff, as we've said so many times, changes rapidly. Sometimes year over year, sometimes month over month, sometimes week over week. And then the other aspect of it is, if you continue to drill down, is that this particular staff has a set of challenges that I think other staffs around the country might not have, which is fighting the perception, the one and done perception problem, the development problem, and then the fact that all of us with microphones and people who are familiar with the program know that there's a cloud hanging over this particular staff over the next 9 or 10 months. So when you add all that together, I think that's why our particular coverage just this weekend, we still plan to be out on the road in June and July, was not what it has always been, because there's uncertainty there. And then there's also not a ton of new developments.
I mean, that's very succinct, and I appreciate that. I also want to give a big shout out to General Ben Sherman for keeping marriages together. That's impressive. It's impressive soft skill for all you HR people out there.
Was it really succinct though? I feel like I talked for 2.5.
It's fine, man. I'm trying to I'm giving you pats on the back. So Sean, I would ask you, Sherrell and I were talking this a little bit before we got on the air. In your mind, is there some sort of future for a stable pattern of high school, recruitment? Is there some sort of potential way that, college programs could kind of get their eyes on a kid and sign him to something, to where they kind of hold his rights or whatever if he decides to go to college? I don't know. In your mind, is it just kind of let it figure its own way out, or do you think that this might be a place where, I can't believe I'm saying this out loud, the NCAA could be proactive in something for a change?
I don't know if we're going to see any proactiveness from the NCAA, and I know, I'll let Sherrell maybe talk about some of the stuff pre-air, which I think we might have talked about on a podcast maybe back in the wintertime, going through some hypotheticals around what recruiting could look like. But maybe just in terms of this being the first live period, definitely didn't have as much attention initially. There's still, and I know right now, especially UNC, right, that 2024 class was one that was well publicized and well built up. You had Cadeau jump up earlier, but you look at Cadeau and Jackson and Powell, and those three guys, a lot of publicity. Cadeau 2 years, and then Jackson Powell 1 year, and the bang wasn't really there as expected. So I think, especially for UNC right now, that's what has been reality. But there are many other programs. Look at Purdue that have been able to recruit people and then keep them through the pipeline. And I think it'll be interesting, really interesting to me this year of Dixon and Dennis, and how much are they playing, and then how do they continue to, whether it's at UNC or somewhere else, how does that continue over their sophomore through junior or senior years, where I think Dixon could be that ideal player that, based on his physical attributes, isn't getting a lot of hype or love, but he is a very efficient and is able to contribute on the court. So is he a guy that can outplay his ranking without having those oversized expectations of needing to get to the NBA or be a lottery pick like maybe Ian Jackson to an extent? And I don't know if it was by design, by luck, but you look at the championship teams UNC and Roy Williams had from 05, 09, and 2017, even 16, right? All those guys were 5-star recruits. A lot of them had NBA deficiencies, which kept them in school longer. Now it's a different time, so it might be harder to keep people in school longer. But if you're trying to focus on those players that can contribute, like a Dixon, which we think earlier from day one, it's still definitely worth, especially with a GM and with a scouting department coming, of trying to identify those players and recruit that skill set, in addition to a Caleb Wilson or some of the top 5 or 10 players that you think can be immediate impact. I think you fall into trouble when you start getting outside of that box. But in terms of what can be done, I think it's once again, an overseas model. We've been talking about it for months and months of how this really is international basketball, and it's going to be extremely hard to, I think, for low major and mid majors to compete / have coaches that want to be doing this for a living. So how do you keep the Division I flowing and everybody continuing to ideally see improvement across the board, and at the end of the day, the dollars are continuing to come in from a revenue standpoint? But maybe I'll throw it over to Sherrell, and I can jump in, but I don't want to steal too much of his
Well, I'll team up. Sherrell, just share with everybody kind of your back of napkin, belly up to the bar thought. Kind of, some people might say it's half baked. I kind of like it. I think I haven't heard anything else that is not, that would fly as much as what you're getting ready to share with us. So uncork it, man. Let's hear it.
And I will say, I'm sure I'm not the first person to think. I know I'm not the first person to think of this, so I don't want to take credit like it's, the best thing ever or anything, because I'm sure other people have thought it. But I think the first enterprising coach, athletic director, or general manager to figure out how to incorporate Sean's Euro model, club model, minor league model is going to be one who does really well. And what I mean by that is, sure, you can go in the portal every year and try to sign 7 or 8 players for a combined 13 or 14 or $15 million each year, and it's going to go up each year. You can try that. Or maybe you try to sign 4 guys to kind of exorbitant salaries, and then you develop a relationship with maybe a lower or middle tier school to kind of be your, for lack of a better phrase, feeder program, your minor league program. Sure, they can compete at the Division I level still, but it would be a situation where there'd be money promised, via contract, obviously all above board. And lawyers, hit us up if this is something that sounds incredible and couldn't happen because of various statutes or laws. Please let us know. But why couldn't Joey Powell University and Sean Moran University enter into an agreement where Joey Powell University, as the mid-major school, says, look, we need money, you guys need players. How about we do this? You guys agree to play us every year. You guys agree to come to our small little gym, in the backwoods of Rayford. Come to our small little gym once every 3 years. We get all the gate. And then you can place, of our 13, I guess 15 scholarships we have available, you can place 4 or 5 guys on our roster on 3-year contracts. You're responsible for their NIL. You're responsible for their salary. We're responsible for their scholarship. In their contracts, it's written that after 2 years, if North Carolina wants them and feels like they're good enough, North Carolina can essentially trigger something in the contract that is calling them up. And if they enter the portal, they have to go to Carolina. I know that sounds insane, but I don't think it's particularly, I don't know how it's illegal or how it wouldn't pass muster. It seems like it fits.
Is
There
it
are a lot
worse
of
than what we
schools.
have right now?
I don't think it's worse
Well, there's
because
nothing worse.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. If Sean was 15 years younger with his jump shot, he could go out there and make $1 million pretty easily in this environment.
You get my point.
So what I'm saying is, though, at least there is some measure of control, and there's a benefit for all parties. It's a benefit for the 4 or 5 guys who are placed because they know there's something bigger. If they do well at Joey Powell University, they can go to Sean Moran University, which is a blue blood or a high major division school. They're getting some kind of salary from Sean Moran University or a high major school, and they're getting a chance to play and not sit on the bench at Sean Moran University or high major blue blood school. So I think it could work. Obviously, there's probably a lot of hoops to work through. I'm sure people will not like the idea, but I think it's one that is possible and probably a little bit more sustainable, honestly, than the current environment. So just curious y'all's thoughts on that.
Go ahead,
I'd
Sean.
almost look at it, looking at what the NBA's done over the last few years of the two ways to an extent, because from a high school player perspective, are you going to want to, especially if you're top 50, top 100, sign up and say, hey, I'm signing up with UNC, but I'm going to be playing at UNCG for a year. But if you do have more that maybe ability to float up and down, or that way there is playing time and there is a longer term plan, which would help the schools that have that development system in place. I think that could be something that would work. And once again, more from a smaller school or mid-major school, now you're securing a little more talent versus being on the hook to identify that talent, have it produce so well in 1 year before and then they're off, that you're able to capitalize that as a coach and jump up the ranks. You have a little more stability to try to build something. Because I don't know how, if you're a low major or mid major coach, the money is good, but it's got to be such a tough. It was tough already, but now it's has to be one of the tougher things to do, where you pretty much have to hit the lottery with a few players that all are performing well at the same time, and then you're getting out at the same time they're getting out. But that could ideally bring some consistency and some development opportunities. I think it was The Athletic had an article earlier this week where they interviewed, there's actually a few GMs from German BBL programs and elsewhere overseas, and some of the agents, but they were complaining that, hey, they have these youth teams where they've identified the talent, and now it's coming up through their ranks, so eventually it will play on that top team, but now it's getting siphoned to America because of the salaries. But they have those systems in place, and it has acted as a feeder program over these years.
So what I want to do, go ahead.
I was going to ask y'all this. What if, again, toss aside the legalities, like we don't know that part. We're
just that
talking
little
about,
part, yeah.
yeah, just that little part, just hyperbole. But like, what if private equity has talked about getting into athletic departments and which are funded by the government, which are part of government entities, then why couldn't Kentucky, for example, say, you know what, we're going to buy the Northern Kentucky basketball program. We're just going to buy it, and what we're going to do is we're going to use all of our resources and put, treat it like almost like a JV, and use it as a feeder program, like you said. It's part of the Kentucky school system, so the admissions process and transferring credits and all that stuff should be pretty easy. We're going to buy the University of Northern Kentucky's basketball team. We're going to sign 9, sub 100 players each year. We're going to give them a modest salary, and we're going to let them compete, let them play a lot. We're going to have one of our assistant coaches. He's going to go down for the year and be the head coach at Northern Kentucky. And when the season's over, we're going to say, which of these 4 guys can we bring up to big Kentucky? Like, is that far-fetched when you see what's happening now?
Yeah, so I want to put a pin in this, and here's why. I want the folks that are listening to this and watching this, jump in on the thread that this podcast is posted on the message boards. I want to hear your thoughts about it. I want to hear what everybody's kind of feedback and reactions are to it, because as Sherrell said, is it that far out of left field considering where we've come from 2009 to right now? Is anything Sherrell said that far-fetched? And I'll be honest, I didn't chime in yet, but the reason I like the idea is because it gives us one thing we don't have right now with the way the transfer portal is, with unlimited transfers and guys going to somewhere for 3 months, not like in spring football and transferring again. At least Sherrell's model gives you some sort of continuity. And that's the thing that is gone almost completely from college basketball, with an exception of a handful of players like Seth Trimble, and that's probably going to be a name that we should start getting royalties off of and sharing with the player, because we're going to say it a lot over this coming year. But I think he's a good example of the continuity that's been lost. So as we wrap this show, I want everybody to kind of take the thoughts that Sherrell and Sean have kicked around and throw it out there. What would you do? You steer the ship. What would you do to kind of shape up or create some continuity that has gone away from the college game? And I'm going to throw the caveat out there that going backwards, I don't think is an option. I think realistically, that's probably horses out of the barn, toothpaste out of the tube, whatever idiom you want to use. Adage. But make sure throw your thoughts into the thread behind this. I'd be curious. And again, there's not a ton of other real developments breaking. Obviously, as they do, we'll be on top of them at IC. But I would be curious to see what this audience thinks about what Sherrell and Sean have posited here, and where you would take this. So as we get out of here, think about what we just said. Again, we have no idea how this high school recruiting model is going to go, where things are going to shape. We just know that things are in flux now, and they don't look to be stopping or settling anytime soon. I would, in fact, venture to say there's going to be more change before there's stability. So think on that. Give us your feedback. I'd be curious to see what everybody thinks, and then we'll take some of the best thoughts here and see if we can't throw that back in for maybe a part B of this discussion. Before we get out of here, Sherrell's going to give you guys the kind of summer schedule as it looks right now. I know we've tried to give you guys some pretty good guardrails as to what happens next with portal closing. You got to declare by this date. So Sherrell, give us a kind of a rehash of that before we get out of here.
Yeah, as far as things are changing, there's still a lot of familiarity within the calendar. So once May kind of wraps up, like we said, the live period for May is over. There's another little live window. I think it's like 36 hours where coaches can be at the MBPA Top 100 camp. And that is going to be in early June. I believe it's June 9th and 10th that coaches are available. Don't hold me on that date, but it's that week. So they'll be able to watch guys there. That's not with their AAU teams. That is a select only event led by the MBPA. And it's held on to its stature. It was a little shaky there for a little bit, I think, but they've really done a good job of getting some of the top guys to attend. So there's that. And then you have in June, there's 2 scholastic weekends, which basically means Carolina can watch guys with their high schools. It's back-to-back weekends, the weekend after Father's Day and the weekend after that. So the last 2 weekends in June, coaches can be on the road. And UNC typically does take advantage of that, especially with some of the in-state talent that has been around the last few years. They usually do that. And then you get into the 2 July evaluation periods, which is, all the circuits. There's New Balance and Puma now. They are on the scene, and UNC had a coach at the Puma circuit in Wichita. So that speaks to the talent there. Tony Bryant, who's an offered forward, was there. And then there's a couple of other players that I think they are potentially interested in who played there. And then, of course, you have Adidas, Under Armour, and Nike will be having their events both in July. As far as visits are concerned, all of July, except for those live periods, is a dead period. So there's no off-campus recruiting for coaches at all outside of those events. And then most of August as well is a dead period. So there's no on-campus visits. There's no off-campus visits by coaches. There's just phone calls and stuff. So we're going into a period where once you get out of June, there's not going to be a lot of time to take visits or anything for maybe some slow rolling international players who could come onto the scene later in the summer, or if a coach randomly gets fired and on June 15th for those kind of situations. So that's what the schedule looks like. A few chances for coaches to be out and to see players. And really June has become just as big of a month as April used to be back in the day, because you got MBPA, you got the 2 high school evaluation weekends that they can be out.
Appreciate you, man. That's a nice little way to wrap up the show. So we'll do so. Sherrell, McMillan, Sean Moran, always love what you guys bring to the show. Appreciate everybody who listened to us tonight or listen to us tomorrow or whenever you're listening to us. Thanks for making us a part of your podcast habits. And hopefully we're the best place for you to find UNC basketball news. If you don't like UNC basketball, why are you here? But if you like UNC stuff, Inside Carolina's got plenty more things for you. All kinds of stuff to get you through the summer. We ain't stopping. There is no off season. I've seen a shirt that said that. Appreciate you guys being here. Remember, like, rate, review, subscribe, all that stuff. Shout out to Johnny T-Shirt for sponsoring, to John Sigley for producing. Until next time, I'm Joey Powell. This has been the Coast to Coast Podcast on InsideCarolina.com. Tell your mother hello for me.